All right, the November meeting of the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors will come to order. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Chair Kaplan.
Here.
Vice Chair Kleist.
Here.
Linda Bailey. Randy Collins. Kendall Taylor. Matt Harris.
Here via Zoom.
Hillary Orr. Jason Thomas. Jesse O'Connell.
Here.
Chair Kaplan.
We have a quorum now. So, yeah. Hi, Linda. We just got started. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk. We will go ahead and do public comment now. So we will ask if there are any speakers that have pre-registered. I see none in the room, but is there anyone who had indicated on Zoom that they wanted to speak? Joseph has his hand up.
No, I'm sorry, I'm not. I'm not sure how I got up there. Sorry about that.
It does not appear there have been any hands raised.
Okay.
Other than Joseph's. So.
Okay. Do we have any members of the public on that? I don't know if you're able to tell, because if not, then we'll just move on. But otherwise, we can pause and see if anybody wants to be
It
recognized.
looks like you have one attendee.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to the member of the public, if you wish to be heard in public comment, you can go ahead and raise your hand. We're going to wait a few seconds to see if you'd like to be heard, and if not, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Okay. All right, public comment is closed. We will move on to the approval of the October board meeting minutes, which were included in your packet. Are there any corrections to the minutes as they were submitted? If not, I'll take a motion to adopt them. Moved by Jesse. Is there a second? Second by Steve. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, minutes are adopted. Item number 3, chair's report. And then we're also going to take up the revision of the public speakers policy, which we had revisited after your comments. Just in terms of chair's report, I wanted to recognize Dash staff. Many are in the room who were responsible for a wonderful event that we put on for the Commission on Aging's Transportation Committee a couple of weeks ago here at the, actually, I guess it was last week at the Dash facility. And I just want to acknowledge those who were a part of this event. We had the Transportation Committee members come to receive briefings on kind of the state of Dash, talk about the new network and the success that has had, some of the safety features we have on our buses, some of the financial challenges that we have. We talked about electrification, then we did a tour of the facility. And I got a lot of kudos from the members of the commission who attended, also because this was the first committee meeting where someone had provided lunch to them and goodie bags. So in addition to Josh, we had Martin presented, Stephanie presented, Edward presented, Terrence was the tour guide, and Caitlin, I know, worked on a lot of the meeting logistics and assisted with the tour. And I worked a lot with Beth on some of the logistics and putting that together, ensuring everybody could get here. It was a really great meeting to help build relationships between an important commission that has a lot of new members during COVID. And Josh and Martin have presented to the commission many times in the past, but we had a lot of folks who wanted to expose to them. And our commission chair liked it so much that he is bringing the whole commission here probably as soon as December for a meeting at Dash. So I think that's going to be a great collaboration. And it also comes after we're having Jennifer Monaco present on Duke Street in Motion to us later this actually our meeting tomorrow. So I think a lot of great interest in that commission, getting them more aware and excited about some of the transportation infrastructure in the city. So thank you to all for helping to put on that meeting. That's all I have for the chair's report. So let's look at the public speakers policy. I believe we've captured all the feedback that we had, but if I'll take any discussion or any other changes that folks have to the policy as it was presented. If not, we'll go ahead and vote on it, and then it will become our kind of working document, and that statement will be read starting next month. Okay. I know, Matt, you're the only board member online. Do you have any comments? There don't appear to be any in the room.
I don't. Thanks, Dave.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. All right, then I will ask if there's a motion to adopt the policy as it was presented.
Motion to adopt the policy as presented.
All right, thank you, Steve. Is there a second? Okay, Hillary? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, passes unanimously. So my ask would be that we add that to the meeting section of the website. And with the statement that will be read, probably the easiest thing to do would be to just have that laminated and just put that out with whoever's presiding. And we'll have a way to kind of usher in public comment and kind of set a good tone for it. So thank you, Josh and Beth, for your work in putting that together. All right, turn this over to Hillary for the TNS report.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Okay, so just wanted to keep you in the loop on the Duke Street in Motion project. We hosted 4 public meetings in October. We had pretty good turnout. I think one of our meetings, we had almost 100 people show up. So good turnout and a lot of good feedback during the open house sessions where we got to kind of talk one-on-one with the community. And we had a public engagement period that was open through October, and we'll be having our next advisory group meeting on November 17th to kind of go over the summary of what we heard and start to narrow down some of the options that we looked at so we can get to end-to-end corridor alternatives to dive deeper with analysis and travel times and kind of figuring out how those might work and ultimately trying to get to a preferred alternative. Okay, so next, I added a couple rail projects that we have been working on with the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority, VPRA. Recently, there's been a number of kind of rail projects moving forward in our area. So the first one I just wanted to note is the Alexandria 4th track project, and this is looking at constructing an additional track for 6 miles. And it goes through Arlington and Alexandria and will connect then to the southern end at Long Bridge. So there is a $45 million grant to do this. It's in final design, so we're working through, and that is moving forward pretty quickly. And I think it's minimal impacts right now to folks in Alexandria, but just want to be aware that it is happening. And the other project that is kind of exciting actually is the King and Commonwealth Rail Bridges. So VPRA did a feasibility study over I'm not sure exactly when they started. They talked to us first in September as they were finalizing this study, but they're looking at the rail bridges that go over King Street and Commonwealth Avenue, which are pretty low. They trucks crash into them a lot. They look terrible. And so they have done an analysis to determine whether they want to repair them, or they looked at 4 different scenarios, and ultimately they're recommending that they replace them in full. So that's a project that we'll be coordinating with them. They had a public meeting on the 2nd, and then they're presenting to the Transportation Commission on the 16th of November. So if you have interest in that, you could attend that meeting. Let's see, lastly, I have some metro updates with the Potomac Yard Metro Rail Station. As we know, the opening date was delayed, but they did have the first test train went through the Potomac Yard station last month. So that was a major milestone, and we've been told we'll get an update on the opening in December. The Silver Line opening, WMATA has announced November 15th. As far as we know, that is still moving forward. And then lastly, the FY24 budget, always a great discussion with WMATA about this. We are talking with them currently, as are all the jurisdictions, about the $46 million budget gap that they've let us know about. So they're looking currently at a number of different efforts to reduce this budget gap, and it could include service reductions, fare increases, and looking at some other kind of transferring of maintenance, but that is something that we are kind of tracking along with very closely, since we will likely have a role in fulfilling that gap. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Just one from me, Hillary. The Commonwealth and King Railroad Bridge, is there option, particularly with Commonwealth, to expand the sidewalk under there, or is the bridge gonna be the same footprint?
They are looking at, we will look at that with them, depending, it's not part of their scope, but it's something that if they can potentially, if they're able to widen it, that is something that the city would look at with them to see if we could provide better infrastructure underneath. Right now, scope is replacing kind of in kind, but maybe raising the vertical height. So we'll continue to work with them and see what's feasible.
When do you think they would know of, and that was something?
They presented their schedule, which I don't have memorized. I believe they're looking at construction was 25, 26 potentially. I would have to go back and look at when the schedule for design is, but there'll be more public meetings on that, and we'll continue to coordinate with them.
Thanks.
And Hillary, obviously, as you just point, we're several years away, and it's probably hard to know at this point, but if the replacement necessitated closing King or Commonwealth for any point in a way that would impact dash headways and routes that run through there, I assume we'd have ample time to accommodate that.
Yeah, we'll know their maintenance of traffic plan, and we'll certainly work with all of our bus providers in the area.
Does the city have any input on the design of what it should look like, what it will look like, and all that, or not at all?
We'll review it with them. I know they're looking at replacing the current type of the bridge deck structure with a ballast bridge deck structure, which is better. Our engineers will certainly be looking at the plans and reviewing them, and we have opportunity for input, but it will need to be within their scope.
Sure,
Mhm.
okay.
Thank you, Hillary. And then at this point, I'll just ask if there are others, many of you serve on boards, commissions, and have updates that would be relevant to our work here at Dash. Does anybody have anything they want to share? Okay. Murat, remind me what time you need to leave to get to council. Is it very, very soon, or what time? You said you had to go to the council, 6:15. Well, maybe we should take the Duke Street motion letter up first. I think it's just a couple of updates passed. And then let me just ask for a clarification question. If we consider convening an executive session, we won't have a quorum at that point. Are we still able to vote to go in executive session?
My understanding was you have to have a quorum to start the meeting. I don't know what as far as in person, you would maintain a quorum as long as you had Matt. I don't know, but to conduct business.
Okay.
It wasn't my understanding that we were limited from continuing the meeting if a member had to step away from in person.
Okay.
I will be joining via Zoom.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just wasn't sure if, I thought the quorum had to be members that were here physically present, but you're saying that's just to start the meeting. That doesn't impact
I
any
believe so.
business we take. Okay. Okay. Well, I think that's a fine. That's
That's
fair
I think we can ask
explanation, and
forgiveness.
we don't have anyone who has said
Yeah, I
otherwise. So,
mean,
okay.
right.
Well, I just wanted to make sure we wouldn't be impacted in
we're
what we had
open.
to do tonight. Okay, well, in that case, just before there was one other announcement I had that I neglected during the chair's report. So let me just go over that quickly. And I won't spend too much time on this because I know we don't have, some of our members aren't here tonight, but in December, I just wanted to tee this up. In December, we need to have a discussion about whether we want to submit a bylaws change to council when they, as stockholders, have their next meeting in February, specifically about whether we go back to having a fixed number of seats on the board. So currently our board is set at between 9 and 11, with 6 to 8 of those members being citizens. And that was a change council made in 2020. And when we recruited recently in 22 to bring on Jesse and Murat, we kind of had, as a board, if you recall, had to decide how many members we wanted to seat. And prior to 2020, for Dash's history, there had always been a fixed number of members on the board. So the board always recruited whenever they went below that number. And, there were some questions about kind of what size we should be, or how we kind of fairly figure out, what we should do in terms of when we fill seats. And one of the options is to have a bylaws change to go back to a fixed number of board members. So in December, if we want to submit a bylaws change, because Dash staff will start working with the city in January to prepare for the stockholders meeting, we have to decide really in December whether we want to do that. And so the question will be, do we go back to a fixed number of board members, and how many? So I just wanted to throw that out there because we will discuss that in December, and hopefully we can come to some consensus on that. Other comments on recruiting process would be welcome and germane, but we don't have to decide anything else other than, do we want a bylaws change specifically to change the composition of the board? So in the packet, I think what we'll do is we'll include the current bylaws section, which just states what the language of what the board breakdown is, and then maybe the timeline for when we recruited last, because part of, I think, why we were sort of up in the air about how many board members to have is it's very work intensive to recruit. And so when we were up at 11 and getting down, we were trying to minimize how often the staff had to recruit. And one of the problems is if we go back to a fixed number of board members, we may have to run recruitments more often because we can't always say, oh, we'll hold this recruitment until we lose another board member and then do them all together. So I think I'll include that in the packet as well. But I just ask you to think about that before our next meeting so we can have a discussion and decide if that's how we want to proceed. Any questions on that? Okay. So Josh, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a number of items this evening to run through with you. The first two are not docketed in your packet, but are informational in nature. One is I wanted to share with you that Whitney Code, who is here, who has been our marketing and communications manager, has recently decided to relocate back closer to home in South Carolina for some family matters. And we're certainly supportive of that, but very sad to see her going. And I just wanted to acknowledge her because she's done a lot with the board. She's been very involved throughout. She started 3 years. So she started in 2019 when we had a Metro Rail shutdown, when we had labor organizing going on. She navigated the pandemic with us. I'm wondering if she's really leaving because she's so exhausted. But I just wanted to acknowledge Whitney and give her a moment if she wanted to say anything to the board or share anything with the board. But knowing that she is going to be leaving at the end of the month. Now she has agreed to continue on remotely for a while. Thankfully, we've all learned how to manage hybrid work. So she is going to help make sure that we have a smooth transition over the next couple of months to her successor. But did you want to share anything? And congratulations.
Whitney, I'll just say this was a surprise to me too. And I wish you the best. You've been wonderful to work with. You've really taken the marketing program to new heights, and some of the creativity of some of the events and some of the awareness that you did, especially around the new network and service changes, has just been terrific. And so you're a real asset to the organization, and we wish you all the best. Congratulations.
Again, the good news would be we'll see her on Zoom a little bit longer. The second item I wanted to note was an informational item and just get a sense from the board if there's a strong opinion on this. We've been approached now formally by the owners of the Bradley Shopping Center out of concern related to some student behavioral issues going on within that shopping center. I would just say in summary, the city as a whole has been dealing with this along with the police force. But there's been a couple of incidents there where there have been fights, there was a shooting, there was a stabbing, and there are apparently large crowds of students congregating at Bradley Shopping Center and specifically in the McDonald's. So we are actively meeting with the landowners to see if there is anything that we might be able to do to help mitigate the problem. With that said, anything that we would do would be, I think, in a sort of temporary response way. I'm not bringing forth to the board a recommendation to remove or relocate a bus stop there out of the context of this, but I just wanted to share that with you all because it's unusual for us to be approached in this manner and for this something to be apparently such an issue that they're talking to us. But we're transporting a lot of students, but frankly a lot of them are walking. So I think my staff are researching it. They're going to investigate. I'm also going to be involved in that, make sure we get all of the facts. But if there's a solution we want to put on the table, we'll do that. But If there's not, then we're just gonna simply let them know that there needs to be some other ways that they mitigate that, but I see Matt's hand is up.
Josh, what do they want from us?
Well, their request to me was remove the bus stops entirely from the Bradley Shopping Center.
Well, I mean, a lot of our riders go specifically to there to shop. I mean, we're not the police. They should go to the police. That's just my 2 cents. Plus, are we going to be liable for our riders and people congregating at our bus stops?
Yeah, so my answer was no. We're not going to be removing or relocating the bus stop. That's not a solution. But again, it was just a formal request. And again, it came in today. I mean, we just had the meeting this morning with them, and I had heard previously, and you may have heard in the community of these situations popping up. And so there's now apparently 2 police officers stationed there in the afternoon. There's a private security. There's all of these things going on. And so anyway, but did you have?
Yeah, so I just wanted, Matt beat me to the question, right? I think it's important for us to always be a good partner to all sorts of stakeholders in the community. That is a weird one to me, to sort of think that we should somehow be regulating, sort of whether students can go to a particular place or not. The one thing that I would suggest, again, just if we want to kind of, try to be the best partners, is if there is a very simple, low-cost way to specifically advertise in those bus stops for other places in the city that you could ride Dash to, right? Like, could we help the students see some information about, like, jump on Dash and go here instead, jump on Dash, go here instead? Might make the business, might make the owners of the shopping center feel like we tried something, but obviously it's nothing that we wouldn't have otherwise done.
Sure, yeah. Sorry.
Josh, are the bus operators reporting any heightened level of activity on the buses? The routes that serve that location, maybe above average noise levels or disorderly behavior on buses?
Yes, I mean, the short answer is yes, we've had some behavioral challenges. We're seeing, I think, between 8 and 10%, we believe, of our ridership numbers are students at this point throughout the system. A little higher than that, maybe a little over 10%. So we're carrying a lot of students, and I've mentioned this to you all before. This is a good problem to have. I think it's good that people are using our system, and they're using it at all ages. And the sense I got from City Council at the budget retreat was we need to do more of this, and I don't disagree. I think that this was sort of an out there thing to come to me. I mean, my response was, this is a bus stop that's heavily used all times of the day, and it's not just used by students. So, and those business owners, I would imagine, would not want to not have access to their shopping center. But I do, candidly, I relate to the fact that they're in a reactionary mode, in the sense that they're trying to get a handle on this, because it does seem to be a problem that has been going on and kind of escalating. So we are being responsive. We do want to respond to them, and I'm going to handle that on a staff level. But I just, again, wanted to inform the board of kind of that this had popped up. As it pertains to service, if there was an immediate short-term need to address something, i.e. discontinue service there, or to temporarily bypass that stop, that's something that's under staff purview, and I would let you all know what we ended up doing. But I think at this point, our response is going to be to go out, study the situation, provide them with a appropriate response, and explain that us doing something different is unlikely to mitigate the problem that seems to be affecting them at this point.
Just asking one related question, because you mentioned it. Is this a good catalyst to actively start to have that conversation with ACPS about how many of their students were moving, and what a more formal arrangement in that regard could potentially look like?
So I've had a preliminary meeting with the superintendent. She is new. I don't know if she's still interim or if she's been appointed permanently. It was high level. Looking back, when we had a student transportation program that students rode free, but the rest of the service was still fares. We had a lot of capability we worked closely with the high school. I mean, it started with the high school. it was a very responsive partnership, and it was one where they were quick to respond when there was a student behavioral issue on the bus in the context of this is a privilege that you could lose. I think that what's happened now is because, well, one, we're fare free, so it doesn't matter. And we're a public bus as opposed to the school bus. I think that they're, at least what I'm getting from them and getting from other parties, i.e. the city departments that I've talked with about this, is that the schools are, if they're off the campus. The students are off their campus. So they're, and I don't know that I disagree with that. You know, what is the school to do about where the students are spending time outside of school hours off campus? But to your point about the transportation and the on the bus and those kinds of things, we do maintain a close working relationship with the high school in particular. And I talked with the principal there, and so we are going to kind of revisit a little bit of what are the issues that we've been having and how can we work together to solve what's going on maybe on the bus. But frankly, it's going to require a couple of things. One is the partnership with the school. The other is training the drivers how to respond to incidents and situations that might occur, and working with the students. So we're kind of going to hit it from all angles, but I don't know that there's a particular specific thing that we've identified to do with the schools at this point.
Well, I sort of just mean that last point, which is like, just because we're fare free doesn't mean that it is cost free for us to engage with students at a heightened level.
Oh,
right? So
sure,
the
on the
extent that,
budget
like,
perspective.
right,
yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
if we are going to be doing this as a beneficial service to the city on an ongoing basis, that's reducing capacity of, you know, the school buses, like, we should really say to them, you know, it's costing us this amount of money, and, you know, I think that's a conversation worthwhile, rather than kind of just letting them free ride
Agree.
and expect that we'll sort it out, you know.
And it's at the Saturday retreat, which is a public meeting, so I can say what he said. You know, the mayor came out and said, we really need to rethink student transportation. And, you know, you look across the river, there's not yellow school buses transporting every student. And if we can think more urban in Alexandria and all of the accessibility that Dash has. And I did say to council, they did ask me, and they said, how are you mitigating the crowding and those kinds of things? And I said, we're rethinking our capital, right? So the most expensive part of the bus is the driver. It costs the same to run a 35-foot bus as a 60-foot bus, but you carry more than twice the number of people. So, you know, changing capital investment priorities so that we have capacity. Those are the kinds of things we're thinking about internally. But to your point, yeah, I think that's going to be a conversation as the budget process continues and as we move through future years.
Getting back to the original issue, I think our involvement should remain that of the safety and security of our riders, not necessarily what goes on private property, and let that be a police issue.
Understood. Thank you. All right. So the next item on my report here is the Duke Street in Motion support letter. This is a result of a request from the board at the last meeting for us to draft a letter that outlines the aligned priorities and principles that the Duke Street in Motion project has with Dash. And it is included in your packet on page 11. It doesn't paste particularly well into a PowerPoint, so those online may or may not be able to read this very well. But the content of the letter is there, and we are asking for any edits or comments or the approval of this letter so that it can be signed by our chair and transmitted to Jennifer Monaco, and who works closely with Hillary, who has been a great champion of this project, and I know has endured a lot of work and a lot of work to come. So I toss that to you, Mr. Chair, as that is an action item to be considered by the board.
Any discussion? I did add an edit to the draft of the letter that Josh had prepared specifically, which is the final sentence about pedestrian accessibility and safety, because I always feel like we need to look at that in the context of getting people not just on the buses, but getting them to and from the stops. And so thank Josh for putting the letter together. If there's no further discussion, we can go for a vote. I'll ask for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the letter to the Duke Street in Motion project manager supporting the project as written.
Moved by Jesse. Is there a second? Second, Steve. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Oh, come on, Hillary.
Oh,
right.
your mic wasn't on, so.
Oh.
So
Abstain.
Hillary is abstaining for the record.
Okay, one abstention noted. Thank you. I'm going to sign the letter now and turn it over to our board secretary.
Thank you. For the next item, this is the time of year when I present to you the general manager's proposed operating budget under the current services approach for the forthcoming city's budget cycle. I would ask you to turn your attention to page 12 where there is detail. I'll highlight some of the key elements of this presentation on the screen. The proposed operating budget increases to a total of 31,941,842. This includes only mandatory step increases, and I'll pause to say that this is assuming the current collective bargaining terms and compensation, as well as the step adjustments that are in line throughout the rest of the organization aligned with the CBA. The CBA is due to be renegotiated in the spring and expires at the end of June, or can be continued if both parties agree to do that. So this budget does not consider a new collective bargaining agreement. It simply utilizes the existing. This also addressed on escalating costs of operations, so fuel, parts, et cetera. We're seeing a lot of effects, particularly on the fuel side, as Edward will talk about in his report, and you are probably familiar with in your own pockets, and addresses those items for inflation. Of note, in effect to the city's subsidy, so how much the city is contributing of this budget, and we'll get to the details here in a moment, is that the TRIP program, which is the program which funds a portion of the fare free or the losses of fare revenue, which pre-pandemic was in the area of approximately $4 million a year. This is the third year of that program, and it is a step down program. So the amount they contribute each year reduces, with next year being the final year of the program where there will be no contributions from the TRIP program, but we are obligated to remain fare free as a condition of the money that we receive. So it was a 4-year program with 3 years of actual funding. Some of the key assumptions associated with this, you can see outlined as the compensation increases about 1.9 million. The fuel cost is a huge, huge thing for us right now, and I would imagine it's going to affect the city in other areas as well, of 1.1 million. Again, the TRIP funding reduction, that's going to affect the city's subsidy, approximately $1 million. The maintenance, parts, and service, that's the cost of inflation. There is an adjustment to local grant match increases. We're trying to find more grant programs, and we have expended our grant matching budget this year. So we're raising that a bit in order to provide the required matching funds for some of those programs, mostly intern programs and marketing related and communications programs. And then our advertising program continues to underperform. We are continuing to work with the vendor to identify solutions and have implemented some of those, but fundamentally ad purchasing has been down post-pandemic as compared to what it was pre-pandemic. It has not rebounded to the same levels as was previously. This slide that's on the screen now gives you an overview of the budget in comparison from FY23 to 24. You can see we've pulled out the personnel versus non-personnel costs. Keep in mind that non-personnel includes fuel. So it might be a little alarming to see non-personnel go up so much, but that's what that's from. Small capital outlay, which is mostly maintenance related, are outlined there. On the revenue side, you can see that the city's contribution, and this is something that I've been working closely with Hillary and Jan and others getting ready to help the city manager's office and council understand the impacts to the city contribution are outlined there, as well as the trolley contribution. The trolley is just a step step up increases follows previous years with the trip program and the advertising program reductions noted. This slide gives you a 2023 versus 2024, another comparison similar to the one that you saw. Again, the total city subsidy is 29,849,022. So that just gives you a sense of the amount of funding in this the city is contributing. And I'll ask Edward to anytime come to this podium and interrupt me if I am misstating anything, as he has worked very hard, and I want to give kudos to him for helping to pull this together. It's been a lot of work, and this is his first budget cycle with us as he joined in December of last year. So has done a great job in helping us to identify and understand these impacts. The last slide here is an informational slide. We do this every year for this board, just to help us kind of compare ourselves to our other operator here in the city. It's not exactly a fair one-for-one comparison. We recognize there are significant differences between Metro and Dash. But as we have conversations among this board as well as with city officials, I think that this is a great way to show the value that Dash is bringing. And I think I want to thank Hillary and her team for helping with the presentation that went to council, which didn't really reflect this specifically, but I think was reflecting about 60, did we say 60% of the riders are being moved by Dash in the city, and 40% or so are being moved by Metro Bus. So, you know, we're carrying more than half the riders at a lower cost to the city. So I think that's a telling story. Before I open up for questions, I'll just state a couple of things that I understand about the budget and the budget process. This has been submitted as a preliminary draft to the city, and it is always notated as such because it has to go in just slightly before this board looks at it. So it is subject to revision if the board were to choose to do so. It is submitted as a preliminary current services budget. And so it will work through the budget cycle. And in the end, we will come back to you in the spring when the budget process is concluded and say, here's where we ended up. Here's where we started. Here's where we ended up. And at that point, this board would be asked to make the decisions if there is a difference. What are those differences and what are the recommendations to resolve for them? Have we received less funding or more funding? And how should we address that? We're going to talk next about supplementals, and reductions, and I'll go through those in a minute, but I just want to pause for a moment to offer time for any questions specific to the budget, current services budget. Oh yeah, Matt.
Hey, Josh, thanks. Just a quick question on the advertising and one quick comment too. Can you break it down in between inside the bus, outside the bus, and then bus stops? And two, I kind of feel guilty for being an agent to start encouraging the use of advertising inside the bus. Is it really worth it anymore? So thank you.
Yeah, appreciate the question. So we did a competitive procurement for a contractor to provide our on-bus advertising. That they are handling the external advertising, Matt. And they have space on the sides and rear of the buses. We do not sell window ads on our buses, and that was a policy decision, which probably does inhibit us a bit. And the reason we don't do that is we got adverse feedback from the riding public that the ads, the things that covered the windows made it too difficult for our customers to be able to identify where they were in the city. Some transit systems do cover the windows. For example, Metro Bus, they will cover from the bottom of the bus all the way up, but we don't sell those. So this vendor is selling ads. They also sell ads for Fairfax County, I believe. Are they the vendor for them? So they sell ads in a couple of markets, and including markets outside of Virginia. And they have to follow the policy of our ad policy, which is currently the sides and rear of the bus, no internal ads. The internal stuff that you're referring to is oftentimes handled internally. And certainly Whitney can correct me, but so that would be handled internally. So we really don't have an issue with internal ads. And the other feedback we got is internal ads are not particularly appealing to folks who are purchasing ads, because while you have a captive audience, it's more limited. And it tends to be the same audience on a regular basis. You know, we have a lot of repeat riders, and that's a good thing. But you know, when you have an ad on the back of a bus and someone, and I've been, frankly, I'm not a big fan of on-bus advertising. I don't think it looks great. It can draw controversy, and we've done pretty well with it. But I will admit that I saw an ad on the back of a Metro bus advertising Alexandria City public school bus drivers being hired on 14th Street in DC over the weekend. And I was a little taken aback by that. So we had to talk we talked this week, our senior management team, about, hey, maybe we should buy some ads on Metro buses. But honestly, it's a very small portion of our budget. It is really not something that generates such a significant amount of revenue that it can potentially offset sort of the big main cost drivers of our service. Some cities do also sell bus stop advertising, but that would be a separate conversation. I don't know whether there are city ordinances about billboards and billboard advertising, so it's probably more restrictive, I would imagine. So,
Thanks.
absolutely.
Question, and maybe you'll cover this later. We got some color on the council retreat, the discussion about transporting students, but could you share sort of what may have come out in terms of budget guidance they're going to provide, and specifically other things related to transit and Dash that came up?
Yeah, so the feedback from the council retreat was, this is a lift. It's a heavy lift. I think we all recognize that. This is combined with a potential lift with Metro Bus and Metro Rail, which is bigger, but they're ultimately all transportation, right, and general funds. Several council members spoke out about the importance of transit in the city and the importance of the growth that the city is seeing, and how important it is to continue to fund Dash to make sure that we provide the services that we're providing. At least one council member was concerned about making sure that they're equipped with the information to help their constituents understand if there is potentially going to be an increased cost to the community to support transit, how they can tell that story. And that's one of the things that we prioritized, is making sure that our information, we're really proud of our dashboards, and Martin's going to present a couple new ones to you, and we're rolling those out. We are working on we're going to be talking about working on some fact sheets that will hopefully help to understand what's the ridership, how many people are we moving, what's the economic impacts, those kinds of things that I think can help them. Outside of that, there wasn't any specific direction. Again, the council retreat, and Hillary can correct me if I'm wrong, was really more an informational guidance kind of starting the budget process. So as the budget process moves forward, the city manager needs to, make his recommendations, and then present his budget in February, I think. Is that right? February? At which point then it opens up to public comment and those kinds of things. So I walked out of there feeling supported, but also with a recognition that these are real costs. And I didn't walk in there thinking someone wouldn't think they were real costs. I don't walk in there thinking that any of this is cheap, and we run a world-class bus system. We really do. I'm very proud of it. And I think we have a high expectation of ourselves, and our community has a high expectation of us to what we provide. But there's a cost to do that. And I understand and recognize that. So We're going to do everything we can to make sure that the information is out there that helps to support what's going on. You know, for me, I think that we as a team have continued to look at creative ways in our budget, and we're going to be doing that in the reduction process to see what we can come up with as a part of that request. But we do, I mean, we run lean. I mean, we're, you know, the overwhelming majority of our costs are frontline bus operators and maintenance and fuel. You know, it's, you know, and so there's only so much you can do really to curtail that, especially also when you have a contract in place. So, and maintaining and avoiding the salary compression that would go along with outside of the bargaining unit is a non-starter. I mean, not doing that is a non-starter. Whenever we consider, you know, the costs of personnel, we have to consider from the CBA all across the organization because it has a direct impact on every other part of the organization. So we always calculate that accordingly. So what I would say is I'll wrap up by saying there are no additional positions. There's nothing expansion driven in this budget. We do assume, as you'll see in the budget detail, we do assume essentially a where we don't have direct cost increases, we're assuming about a 5% inflationary adjustment. And we just made sure we were consistent in that, which is in line with what we've seen. So I would ask Mr. Chair if the board would consider approving the preliminary current services budget as submitted, understanding that we'll be revisiting this after the budget process, city budget process moves forward.
Discussion from the board? Motion?
So moved.
Moved by Linda. Is there a second? Second, Steve? You have your, are you just waiting to vote, or you had your hand like on there? Okay. All in favor of submitting the general manager's proposed budget to the city?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna abstain again as city staff on the budget discussions.
Okay, noted. One abstention.
All right, thank you. So now we move over to the supplementals. I want to start out this conversation by emphasizing some information that's here on the PowerPoint that may not be as clear in the packet. We, in response to the board's interest, we have comprised 4 of the supplementals. They're essentially exactly the same supplementals from last year that were not funded. They're called for under the ATV. They have been reprioritized. And in a moment, I'll welcome Martin to help answer questions as to how these fit into the overall Alexandria Transit Vision Plan. But since the packet went out and since the supplemental timeline has come and gone, we'll be submitting these tomorrow based on the board's feedback. The city wanted them on Monday, but this board has to review budget, supplemental, and reductions prior to submittal. I just want to emphasize that in the same context, we are going to be generating the recommended reductions. And my position has been and remains that we should endeavor to avoid any reductions prior to advancing any supplementals. And in past years, we've said that. So we submitted a supplemental, but we said in a supplemental consideration, if there is a reduction, the reduction should be offset first before we, in other words, let's not take away bus service somewhere if it's not critically necessary to do so, just to add additional costs on bus service right on the other side of the page. Is kind of my take on it. So the city manager has issued the budget, the supplemental, reduction, a lot of words here. The reduction, which is a 2% reduction target. I was in attendance at a meeting late last week where they mentioned this, and they said they provided this guidance to us late Friday. That equates to about $535,000 worth of reductions. My guidance to staff is to identify half of that in administrative reductions and half of that in service reductions. So we're not just accomplishing that just simply by proposing to cut service, that we're finding ways internally. To be clear for anyone here or anyone who might be watching, we're not going to be proposing eliminating positions that are staffed. We're not going to be proposing a reduction in force. There are a couple other criteria the city manager provided in his guidance, which I agree with. So we would be looking for efficiencies. We would be looking for places where there might be an opportunity to save funds or to do something differently. Examples of this could be maybe old or underutilized technology systems. It could be efficiencies in our training processes, not a reduction in training, but a different way of doing something. It could also be, it can be a position, for example, that is vacant that we're not seeking to fill. So we would be eliminating a position that's vacant, not seeking to fill, but it cannot be a froze. We can't put forth a supplement of a reduction that is a frozen position that we would plan to then unfreeze, if that makes sense. We would need it to be a permanent reduction, whatever that is. We are recruiting for a lot of positions right now, as I know the city is as well. I would not be seeking to put forth positions that we're actively recruiting for. We're trying to fill. We just haven't been able to find someone for yet because those are needed positions. I'm just asking to look at those. So that's my guidance to staff, and they're going to be working on this. I know that have already started working on some we talked about this week. The last thing I will say about this is we have a bit of a conundrum when it comes to the dates of this. The city has asked for these to be submitted on or before November 28th, which is this month and in advance of the next meeting. And although I'm fine putting forth a current services draft budget to the city as a submission, understanding it could be edited, we have never put forth a supplemental or a reduction that the board has not first considered and approved. So I would just ask you all to think about that. I'll finish running through the supplementals and then we can talk a little bit about that. But there's a bit of a timing challenge there, right? And I've expressed that to the city. It would seem that there is a pressure to have all of this information in place in time for early December, which would appear to be the timeframe under which the city manager's office is going to be working on these things. So we can give that some thought as to maybe a creative way to address that, but I just wanted everyone to be aware of that. So I am not presenting any reductions tonight, as we've not had appropriate amount of time to notice you those reductions or to complete them on our end. But we will have those turned around here within the next week or two, so we can consider those.
Could you go back to the
Sure.
prior slide just a second? So the second to last paragraph, early messaging from city managers and city OMB staff have stated that we are to assume these cuts will be taken. So what was transmitted differently this year versus other, because we've gone through this reduction exercise many times before?
It was essentially said to me that reduction targets have been higher in the past as being more casting a wider net and then maybe
Like a
picking-
5, because we've done 5% before.
Yeah, picking bits and pieces and saying, we'll just do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. The new city manager has said he intends to take these reductions, period. That has been his message that I heard. So it is our intention to make sure again, that we're very careful and we make sure we work through these in an effective way when we submit them. In the past, we have found that often the previous city manager would focus more on efficiency opportunities and new revenue opportunities than on the than cutting service, for example. I haven't had a dialogue really as to the reductions and the reduction targets in detail as of yet. I don't know whether there would be a revenue component to this, but frankly, we have so few ways to raise revenue at this point. We don't have fares. That's usually a place where transit systems would attempt to raise revenue, and Dash has done in the past. Our advertising program's in place, but we have limited influence over that. So there really aren't a lot of great opportunities there. We don't receive federal operating formula funds or capital funds. We're pursuing obviously grants for capital, but that's a totally separate piece. That's not a part of the reduction process. So
I'm going to suggest, given that information, and that's helpful to know kind of what's being said at the staff level, that then this makes this year's exercise particularly important because we're kind of locked into those. That I think we are going to have to. It's probably not something we're going to be able to sort out and say, here's the list, and just as everybody approves it, I think we're going to have a meeting to hash this out. And if not, November 28th gets tricky because I think that's what, right after Thanksgiving. So we'll have to. But it sounds like they may have some flexibility to push it back a week or so. So we'll have to figure out when and how to do that. But probably developing a menu of reductions so that way we understand, maybe looking at 3.5 or 4, just so we can choose from those things, and that way kind of have a broader policy discussion about what the budget should look like and what our priorities are. And we've talked in the past, and I guess when those exercises were more theoretical, specifically about whether we go all entirely on the kind of administrative side of the budget looking for those efficiencies versus do we put out some service reductions because we want the community to understand kind of what are some of the true impacts, especially as we look at years cumulatively of having to do that. You get to a point where there's not a lot you can cut from the other side of the budget. And so, but if we're essentially saying at this early point that that's going to be, if we put out a service reduction, that we're saying, yes, we're going to do that, subject to a hearing and approval, I think we have to be very, very careful about that, because that's usually never something that we've been locked into until the spring in terms of saying the community, yes, this has happened. And you and I have talked a lot about how our board is different from almost every other city department, because every other city department does this. And Hillary can correct me if I'm wrong. You guys do this as staff at very high level confidential discussions, because you might be looking at eliminating a program that would cut somebody's job, and that hasn't been taken yet. You don't want that person to know, that they would go out and find another job before they would find out that their position isn't even being considered. I sit on the Commission on Aging. I asked Aging and Adult Services last year or 2 years ago for their reduction targets that they submitted to the manager, and I was told, even as a member of the Commission on Aging, this is confidential work product. We can't share this with you, as a member of the public. It's not something subject to FOIA. And so, yet we are different because this will be out there and it will be known. And particularly for some of our newer board members, I just want to, be clear that we have to act very deliberatively and carefully in how we prepare this exercise, especially if then we are to assume that those cuts will factor into our budget. And yes, we can make adjustments in the spring if we find out, that the cost of fuel has gone down tremendously or something like that. But we're looking at making some decisions a lot earlier on than we usually do. So sure, those are my
and I would, this is a puzzle, right? These are all pieces to that puzzle, and the puzzle could look a lot different in the spring. So I'm always cautionary in saying that what we're talking about now and what we end up talking about when the process is done could be different. You're right. I mean, our budget is set by this board. It's approved by this board. Service changes, increases or reductions or cuts are approved by this board. Typically it's just in the context of the stockholders have been the direct funding. For example, the Line 30 project, which was funded, essentially the board ratified that, but there wasn't a lot there. I acknowledged, service cuts can get ugly. They can be a lot to navigate. And I don't want our ridership to not have the opportunity and the community not have the opportunity to weigh in on that. And I think that's what you're expressing is that's a process that we'll have to make sure we're prepared to navigate as we move forward. And I will certainly make sure that in the communication, when this is submitted to the manager's office, that is clear. Because the details of how these funds are moved around and what happens is the purview of this board. So if we end up at the end of all of this and there's, we've gotten to this place, I'm going to look at it and say, again, as I mentioned before, my priority is to sustain what we do, what people rely on, the service we provide, the core of what we do. That's really my number one priority. And if we can avoid, any kind of service cuts, that's going to be where I'm going to be looking to be. So I really wish I could tell you guys a lot more detail. I don't have it at this point. It's but you're right. In past years, we've had to do this process. It is a public process. So what we bring back to you all and what is submitted to the city does become public before it's even taken. But I think that we try to make sure that we communicate in the same vein that these things are being submitted as options. And it may be that it would work through the city's process and they would be taken in one place, but not taken in another part of that process. I don't know. As I mentioned with the supplementals, I just want to make sure that you all understand how those are prioritized right now. So supplemental 1 is related to line 33. And this is proposed to provide improved Sunday service and enhanced connectivity to the new Potomac Yard Metro Station. It enhances service to every 30 minutes instead of every 60 on Sundays along line 33. So this is aligned with Potomac Yard. Supplemental 2, again, these are each packaged as their own separate options. And as you all may recall, last year, they were all debated separately as separate options. But we are always asked to provide our own priority to those, which the board can certainly edit if the board desires to do that. So on supplemental 2, this is related to line 34, additional service to provide improved Sunday service and enhanced connectivity to Potomac Yard Metro. Again, going from every 60 down to every 30 minutes. The theme here is related to increased frequency, which we know has driven ridership throughout the system. Supplemental 3, line 31, increased off-peak and weekend trips for line 31 to run every 15 minutes or better, all day, 7 days a week. And this improves the east-west connectivity between the West End, King Street Metro and Old Town. And the last one there, line 32, is improved midday, evening, and weekend service along line 32 from every 60 minutes to every 30 for wait times along Eisenhower Avenue. A detailed table is always provided and is provided in your packet. This talks a little bit about the equity components of this, the impacts and alternatives, and the cost efficiency of those relative investments, as well as the projected net change in ridership. It is in a more detailed version. I've cut off the first part of it just so it fit there on the slide. And certainly we can talk about what these numbers mean, but this is something that we've presented and Martin has gone over quite a bit in the past. And I would just wrap up by saying these follow the exact same, these are the same supplementals as were submitted last year, minus the line 30 improvement, which was taken and just slightly reordered according to priority.
I think the reordering makes sense because it reflects a city priority that's very high, which is encouraging usage of the new transit station, but also they reorder by putting some of our lower cost priorities at the top and perhaps give us a more, in a very, what we already know is a challenging year, give us maybe more likelihood that they will be be taken, although noting that the ridership impact will be less, because like our top priorities are about Sunday service, although, we are now about a all week and people being able to make all kinds of trips. So investing in Sunday services is important to do. So I support this.
And I'll just add that also they very neatly reorder as most cost efficient to least cost efficient, which I think is another good organizing mechanism.
All right, thank you. So these are due to be submitted. Well, they were due, but we told the city you all would consider them this evening. So if you're considering approving them, we would welcome that, and then we will turn and submit them to OMB at the city in accordance with their requirements.
Need a vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Jesse, second. Linda, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? One abstention.
Well, Hillary, you can't abstain anymore. We've gone through all of the stuff you can abstain from, so. Mr. Chair, if it pleases the board, I will turn it over to Edward, recently reelected as his ANC Regional Area Commissioner. What is the term?
Advisory Neighborhood.
Advisory
Commissioner,
Neighborhood.
6
Yes.
POA. Yeah.
So he won an election last night, but
Oh, congratulations.
Thank
like, by apparently a large margin.
98%, 98.6%. I did not. So there were some write-ins, but I don't know who they were for, but I beat off right in. So
Popular guy on
So is
Capitol
that-
Hill, apparently.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's Capitol Hill.
yeah. So Hill East, kind of south of Pennsylvania Avenue.
Oh, okay, cool. So you have Eastern Market here?
Eastern Market is two.
Oh, they're
mi-
north. Oh,
is
the
a little
Navy Yard
further.
Marine Barracks would be your.
No, actually, Potomac Avenue Metro Station, kind of.
Oh,
that-
okay.
that
Oh,
area.
like Congressional, so around Congressional.
Very close
Okay.
to Congressional Cemetery, yes. Yeah. Oh, sorry. There you go. All right, well, I'm going to give a update of where we are year to date and our projections for the end of the year. Through September, we have a year-to-date surplus of 1583 and a projected year-end deficit of 727,000, just under 727,000. As has been mentioned in previous months, our largest budgetary pressure comes from fuel and lubricant costs. We went into FY23 with a $2.40 projected cost per gallon. Our most recent cost was $4.35 per gallon. I've presented this chart so you can see against our budget where those costs are coming in, and you can see that large variance. This is projected, we are projected to exceed our fuel budget by just over $938,000 at current costs. So looking at that deficit of 27K that were projected for the end of the year, you can see that fuel makes up more than that projection at $938,000. Some of the other items of note, operations overtime still does remain a large challenge. CBA requirements also stipulate that the most senior operators get preferential treatment or preferential, I guess, priority on the overtime costs. So that compounds the issue there. Some of this overtime has been offset by the fringe benefits coming in lower than projected, because our budget does project full employment for operators, but that should be noted that that's not a sustainable strategy. So those savings, while those have helped to offset some of the overtime costs, that's not a sustainable thing that we can look at long term. A couple other items, maintenance and repair parts have experienced inflationary pressures, especially tires, as tire cost is tied to crude oil. And some of that was alluded to in our current services FY24 budget, and you saw those costs increase as well. And then lastly, building maintenance, we had some holdover costs from FY22 that contributed to some overages there. Looking at the budget as a whole and by line items, you can see maintenance is our largest variance for the year-end projection, and that's where the fuel costs come in. So as stated, we have a slight
surplus year to date, but looking at 727K deficit. I'll also make one mention as we're looking at the year through September, and this will apply to future months as well. Previously, we only recognized the I-395 grant reimbursements as we receive them. We do actually know kind of as we present them what they'll be. So I'm going to present those in the financials, so you won't have that kind of that lag of year to date versus, you know, projections. The year to date and projections should more accurately align now with that change to how we're presenting these. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions.
Edward, it's Matt. Just a quick question. Can you break out the utilities by electricity to figure out if our electricity usage is up with the buses?
I can. Let me see if that's easily accessible in a moment.
And then a corollary to that is actual gallons of diesel. Is that going down because of the electric buses?
I would have to do a larger analysis on that. I do have that information because we track the gallons purchased with each invoice, but I don't have that information at hand.
Because the utilities themselves don't look that bad.
One of the things that we did with the final budget for FY23, the final budget did increase some of the utility costs based on what we've been seeing at the end of FY22. So we did correct some of what was in current services based on the actual usage we experienced in FY22. So that can explain somewhat why utilities are more aligned with the true costs we're seeing.
Yeah, I think we did see last year, right? We
Yeah.
saw electricity go up last year, but I think that's a good question, Matt. I mean, we could certainly do some analysis on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll need to do a further analysis to break out those costs, but I can have that prepared for the next month's meeting. I can provide the various utility costs.
I would also add that I think over the last year or two, the city did a lot of energy improvements in the building. One of which was to replace the majority of the lighting from fluorescent to LED. So I think we saw both it come down probably, but the net energy cost went up. So it'd be interesting. We'll have to think about what the timing was of that. I'm sure Ray has it. Ray, by the way, is out right now because he's welcomed also a new family member to the world. So he had his first child recently. So that would be something to look at.
Yeah, I agree.
Great.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Martin.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Martin Barner, Director of Planning and Marketing. Have a couple performance updates for you this evening. First up is our KPI dashboards for the month of September. These were provided in your packets. You can see a more readable version there, but I would note this is based on September data. September is usually a chaotic month for us. It usually is the return of schools. We often see higher ridership, so that's a good thing, but we also had the Metro Rail shutdown starting in early September. The Duke Street pilot has been going on. So there's a lot of factors that have led to a little more interesting situations for some of these metrics, including on this first one, preventable. This is a safety and security preventable events. You see there's 8 preventable events, and that has triggered the red alert for that. Anything over 7 events, we have kind of identified as the metric. So it's just slightly over that mark. And we have seen that, like with some of the other metrics that have kind of triggered warnings here, the preliminary October data has shown it revert back to kind of normal levels. So just wanted to note that before I go through these. So that's the safety and security. Second one is the customer service. On this one, this is the same one that you saw last month. One thing I'll notice that the CSI, the Customer Satisfaction Index, which we talked about last month, is actually below 80. It's 77.2, which is the lowest we've seen since we started tracking this. Again, we had an unusually high number of complaints, 21 valid complaints in September, which we think is related to some of the ongoing shutdown and other incidents, and of course, having more riders as well, which I'll talk about in a second. So you have that. Other metrics on that are looking good, though. So this is a new dashboard that was not provided last month. This is our reliability dashboard, which focuses on-time performance. The top two graphs show you on-time performance. On-time performance is typically measuring the arrival times for buses at all the different stops and time points for every single day, every single trip, and the percentage of those that arrive less than 1 minute early or less than 5 minutes late. So within that window is considered to be on time. And we are usually among the top performers in this metric from around the region. You can see that we did slip a little bit this past in September for 85%, which is right on our target. Our target is 85%, so we're right at it. And again, we think that might be due to some of the ongoing events throughout the city. Other metrics on here, we have fleet downtime percentage, which is measuring the number of hours buses are on deadline overall. So you kind of take the total hours in a month times the number of buses. That's the maximum number of hours you could have buses at service. And then you remove the hours for deadline, which is when buses are not available for service. So we see that about 16% of the time buses are down. And we've it's a new metric that we've started using. So we're still kind of figuring out what the target should be. We currently have it at 15%. So we're a little bit higher than we'd like to be on that one. And we have a couple other missed trips, buses available for AM and PM, and then also the average distance between failures, which is kind of taking the number of mechanical breakdowns that we have divided by the mileage that we travel. So that is the reliability. And the last one I have is ridership, which you also saw last month. Again, good news here. You can see that weekdays were up to close to 15,000 average boardings on a typical weekday, which is the highest that I've seen since I've been here. So really excited to see that. Even the weekends are up as well, almost 10,000 on Saturdays. So really great to see that. Line 35 has just been through the roof, over 5,000 average boardings on that route alone, which is, I think, the most perhaps on any single route in Dash history, maybe. We can't verify necessarily all the way back, but I think it might be safe to say. So good news there. And you can see the graphs as well. And then just kind of moving into the last item, just the ridership updates. This is a better version of the graphs that you've seen in previous months, but it shows you the previous previous 7 fiscal years as the bar graphs. And then the red dotted line is our FY23 ridership month by month. So you can see July, August, September, we've been tracking quite high, over 380,000 boardings in September. I think I might have said this last month, but it bears repeating that that's the highest number in a single month we've seen in over 7 years. So you have to go back to 2015 to see a higher number for a single month than that. So really good news there. Happy to take any questions or discussion you might have.
I just had a quick comment, Martin, which is I remember when I moved to Alexandria, my first year or so, 2004, I boarded a Dash bus, and I remember looking up at one of the signs that were up there celebrating that the system was doing 10,000 average boardings per weekday. That was pre-King Street Trolley, of course, and other changes. But yeah, we've come a long way, and that's a good story because 10,000 looked awfully good back then. So thank you for bringing us some good news.
Sure.
And I would just thank Martin and the team for their work on this. One of the things we've talked about as a board and that I've long had as a priority is more data, better metrics and understandings of our performance and our performance compared to ourselves. And I know we mentioned this last month, but what would be helpful in the coming months as we think about this and as you all sort of react to this information is please feel free to let me know what deep dives would be helpful for you. Kind of like Matt, you mentioned on the energy, like a deep dive on that. These kinds of things we can kind of look at. My longer term goal with the board is going to be these dashboards are going to be live. They're going to be on our website. They're going to be updated automatically as data comes in, and they're public for the riders as well as the local city officials and council to see. And we think they have great information, but there's often a story behind them. And sometimes it's helpful to talk about that story, but that is something we'll be doing internally. And we're getting ready to embark on a whole data-driven decision-making workshop here within Dash to better inform ourselves and think about what metrics we're measuring and how we're reacting to those and how we're using them. Because as I alluded to previously, when it comes to the budget and the story and the things we're doing, these are really important things. It's really great that we see this line. I think, I'm always emphasizing that in any presentation I give. about how incredible that is, and there's no Metro Rail service. So, I mean, you know, and we, you know, we talk about, we don't have the fares, and that is a major impact, but these are people moving around Alexandria, right? They're conceivably not all connecting just into Metro Rail. So it's really, really great to see the success of that. So.
Martin, thanks. This is really great. And I've enjoyed playing around with them too. So one thing that I think would be interesting to see, and I was thinking about this as we were looking at the supplementals and how we had projected ridership for each of the supplementals. So as we get more information and get back to normal with ridership and look at line 30 and the changes that we made, it would be interesting to see, are we meeting those targets? Are we exceeding the targets in terms of what we thought the ridership would be for that investment that the council was making?
Sure. Yeah, we can do that. Something that we could potentially do in our annual TDP, kind of as part of the evaluation process, and look back at some of the changes we've done in the past couple of years. Good. That was just kind of a nationwide, 2013 to 2015 were really strong transit usage. I think that was kind of before Uber and Lyft kind of began to really hit their stride. Maybe fuel prices were still a little bit lower.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Okay,
Thanks.
so Josh, I know before we go into this presentation, because our executive session is related to the presentation and sort of some of the content, maybe we could deal with if we want to try to get a date or figure out a process, either find out a date that works for folks here or figure out a process for selecting a date regarding the budget reductions. I pulled up a calendar for November, and so I see the 28th is the Monday after Thanksgiving, but if we assume we have additional time, perhaps the 30th, which is the Wednesday, so it's the different week, but the time, the day of the week that we meet might be an appropriate time to do that. And I just wanted to throw that out there, or see kind of, because if that works as a date, then we can kind of go ahead and schedule it. But
Is it possible to have that meeting virtually? I know that some boards and commissions are doing, are allowed to do that. Is that something we'd be able to do and still vote, or at least nod recognition of, even if it's not.
Is that- the Commission on Aging, actually, our policy allows for up to 2 all virtual meetings a year, although I don't think that was in the policy. We may have voted on an older version before that was, older template before that was changed. So I don't think is that in our policy?
I think we are. Permitted.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, we
Okay.
are
I'm
permitted. A
mistaken.
limited number, yeah.
But is that, if it's a supplemental meeting to normal board meetings, I wonder if it counts toward one of our 2.
Yeah, I don't know.
Or
I
is
mean-
it calendar year? Have we met it yet?
Yeah, conceivably, you would be taking action. So,
Well, we don't have any oh, you mean in terms of R2, but I thought it was, you could have up to 2 all hybrid, all virtual meetings a year. And so since we never, we may have another one that comes up, and I don't even know if they count based on calendar year or fiscal year. If they count on the calendar year, it's gonna reset anyway, shortly after. So that's a good idea. I think we could go for that in that way, and it'll be easier for everybody to attend. But would and of course I'm springing this on staff to recognize that, but would the 30th be workable for?
At 5:30?
I was at 5:30. We could do it we could do it at 5 if that works, especially if folks are virtual. That may maybe even have more flexibility, but 5:30 it's fine.
Mr. Chair, I might propose, the date looks fine to me. I might propose that if you're flexible on the time, that Beth could solicit the members who aren't here to understand what their availability is, and maybe lock in a time that is best for the most people.
Yeah, that's fine.
If that works for you. It's certainly, I appreciate the willingness to do it hybrid. That does help reduce some of the logistics, especially for travel, for folks to get here and those kinds of things. It could make it easier.
All right, so let's look at that date, and as long as we get 6, which 5 of, and Matt is here too. So I'm just looking around and saying, so if that works for all of us, we have a quorum because we'll have 6 already. So we just have to figure out the time, and hopefully that will also accommodate our other members who weren't able to attend tonight. So
So now, question would be, do you want to take up other matters, or do you want to just convene for that matter and that matter alone and still have your December meeting?
I think we should have a December meeting.
Okay, so it would just be for the purposes of discussing and approving the reduction,
Yeah,
providing reduction
mean,
guidance.
I had one item for December, which I briefed earlier. I don't know. You and I haven't talked yet about what might be on the agenda.
It's
Could
fine.
be-
I'm fine either way.
Yeah, I mean, it could be very,
I just needed the clarity as far as scheduling.
yeah. No, I think we would still have a December board meeting. So
Okay.
maybe a shorter one because we may not have as many.
Okay.
That typically we don't have as many business items. So, but yeah, we'll still have the December meeting.
All right.
Okay.
But we will take care of that and get that scheduled ASAP.
Thank you.
So if you're okay moving forward, so the next item is to introduce David Harmer. I know that he is on the Zoom with us. I did see him pop up earlier. There
Yep,
he
he's
is.
there.
He has arrived. I just want to introduce David. David is the administrator of the Virginia Transit Liability Pool. The Virginia Transit Liability Pool, he will talk about, is a wonderful group of transit systems that have pooled together. They provide our insurance for our vehicles, handle a lot of our claims and liabilities. He's going to do a little presentation here, and I'll try to advance the slides for you, David, as you go. And then once he wraps up, then we will ask you to consider a executive session for legal matters. But I will, David, are you able to hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
we
you, Josh.
Great. I will turn the floor over to you.
And
All right,
David,
I appreciate it.
Dave, before you start, I just wanted to add, you had offered to come up and present to us in person as you
Yes.
did frequently before the pandemic, and you are based out of Richmond. And so I just thought that was not fair to have you tackle traffic to then go right back. But we invite you when you are in town for other business, certainly to come drop in anytime for one of our board meetings. But that was very gracious of you to offer to be here in person.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hated to miss a trip up 95, but you know, you do what you have to do. So next time I would like to be there in person though, and see you all again. And thank you to the board for inviting me and allowing me to present to you tonight. The purpose of this brief presentation is just to provide an overview of what the pool is, what we do, how we operate, and what our role is, basically. And just to start with just a history here and kind of frame it up. VTLP is a group self-insurance pool that was enabled by the General Assembly to provide some degree of independence from the commercial insurance market. And just provide some background, this all came about during an adverse insurance cycle. And property casualty insurance goes through business cycles. They're called soft markets and hard markets. And a soft market is when coverage is readily available and rates tend to be lower. There's competition among insurers, so they lower rates and there's plenty of coverage to go around. And a hard market is the opposite. That's when insurance companies draw back. They might ask for higher self-insured retentions, higher deductibles. They might decrease the amount of coverage they're willing to provide, and they increase rates. And it was during a particularly severe hard market that the pool was formed. And some of the transit agencies in Virginia found themselves with huge cost increases for their liability insurance, and in some cases were unable to get coverage at all, and they were bare. So the General Assembly enabled the pool, and it's operated since then. So it's member owned, it's member run. The board of the VTLP is made of the general managers of the member agencies. They have the final say on rates and pretty much everything that the pool does. The Virginia Department of Rail Public Transportation provided startup funding for the pool, and they maintain a permanent seat on our board. And that is, it's hardwired into our Constitution and bylaws. Neil Sherman is currently our board member from DRPT. And just to let you know, Alexandria Transit General Manager Bill Hurd, who you may have heard of, he was a mover and shaker in getting this thing started. And I've heard the stories of how he, made late night, emergency drives down to Richmond to address the General Assembly to make sure that the Dash was going to be eligible to join the pool. So he was there at the beginning. The coverage we provide, the big thing is liability coverage. And we provide liability coverage for the operation of the buses. So if there's a collision involving another vehicle, if there's a passenger fall down, a pedestrian mishap, anything like that, this coverage responds to that. There's also general liability coverage, which would respond to things that don't have to do with operation of the buses. For example, if somebody in the wintertime came to the administration center and slipped on the ice and made a claim, that would respond to that. We provide physical damage coverage for the fleet. If you think about collision or comprehensive damage or coverage on your own personal auto, it's the same idea. So it protects the fleet against collisions with vehicles, collisions with fixed objects, things like vandalism, wind, flood, fire, that kind of thing. The pool offers high limits of liability, and the reason for that is public transit provides its own sort of risk. It's kind of a difficult exposure in the insurance industry. And there are several reasons for that. It's kind of targeted by the plaintiff bar. If you picture in the event of a lawsuit in a courtroom, at one table is the plaintiff, who is an individual who's been injured in some way, suffered some kind of physical injury. At the other table is a corporate defendant, namely Dash. So it's with that matchup, sometimes it's difficult with juries. And sometimes we find that juries, especially in the hands of a skillful plaintiff attorney, can fall back more on emotions when deciding a case as opposed to the facts or legal doctrine. So for that reason, we offer high limits. Also, many states offer sovereign immunities or tort caps to public transit, like is done for police and fire, but not in Virginia. And we know we have none of those protections. So that's why we offer high limits. We do claims in-house here. In the event of a claim, we work closely with Dash staff. We obtain statements from witnesses, from bus drivers. We take photographs, we review videos, obtain the reports of the police and fire if there are any, interview witnesses, hire engineers and experts. We kind of do exhaustive claim investigations on a lot of things. And the reason is we really don't know which claims are going to become serious. It's hard to tell at the beginning from the amount of damage. Sometimes claims that seem like no big deal end up being a very big deal. So for that reason, we really investigate a lot of these claims very to a high degree. Make a liability determination, and we do litigation management. We work with defense attorneys that are experienced in public transit, which is not a common area of expertise. But we have several that we work with that are highly experienced in this area. We also do loss control in-house. In this, I have to say that we work closely with Dash safety and loss control staff. Dash has an excellent program. And our role here is really one of, augmenting that, being there to help, fill in gaps if we see any, make suggestions. But it's really a support role to what Dash is already doing. We do data analysis. We provide that to Dash. I know they do their own thing. We do it as well in our claim system. Root cause analysis. Again, Dash has a lot of expertise. I know Stephanie is a trainer in this area for, I believe it's TSI, and knows all about this. But we do it at the pool as well and provide our findings to Dash in an attempt to help with that. These are some of the risk management programs. I'm not going to go through all these, but we do annual site safety review. It's a pretty exhaustive review. It's an on-site. We spend a day on site, interviews, questionnaires, surveys. We inspect the maintenance area. We interview the managers. We do ride-alongs, and we provide a report back to the general manager. We track those results year in and year out, so we can see how progress is being made. We do a lot of training. We provide our own training that we generate in-house. We work with consultants and bring them in areas that they have expertise in. We organize TSI, NTI training. We like to attend member training meetings occasionally to sit in on those and provide input. Really, it's a matter of collaboration with what Dash is already doing. So at a high level, it is a partnership. If you think of the stakeholders and the riding public, VTLP and Dash, we have a common goal of the mission, moving people safely. And the pool feels very strongly about our support role in that and supporting Dash in that important mission. So, that's just a little bit about the pool. We really, appreciate allowing me to address you tonight. We appreciate our relationship with Dash, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Questions? You must have hit all the high spots, David.
There you go.
Or they're just hungry, probably.
Yeah, right.
There are some snacks here, but well, I just want to say publicly, I thank David, and as mentioned, I serve as chair of the pool, and he's done a lot for it, and he's served for many years, and most recently just got Greater Richmond Transit Company back in the pool. They had exited. Oftentimes entities exit because they think there's a cheaper way, and they go to private insurance, which usually denies claims and creates problems and ends up in a situation where they just pay off people and go on their way. So
David, I'll ask a quick question. What is your background, actually? I'm just curious if you grew up on the transit side or you worked in the insurance field before you came to the pool.
Yeah, I came out of the insurance field. I worked in, the auto insurance, homeowners insurance, and, worked for a big insurance company for quite a number of years, rose up through the ranks there, and ended up leaving there, went with a third-party administrator. I had a leadership role there, and have been with the pool for 14 years now, and really enjoy working with the pool. Really enjoy working with public transit. The members, Dash and other members are just really great people, and it's been a great experience. What we do here with the pool is like what an Allstate or a Nationwide does, except on a small scale. And it's pretty exciting. So really enjoy the work.
Thanks. All right, so we will proceed to go into the executive session, which David will be staying with us for. I will announce that our next regularly scheduled board meeting is December 14th at 5:30 p.m. We are scheduled to be here in this location, again, here in the boardroom. And Beth will send out an email regarding the scheduling of the special meeting that we're looking at for the 30th and setting the time. So we do have a motion that we'll need for the executive session. So if somebody would just read what is on the screen.
Jesse O'Connell hereby move that the Alexandria Transit Company Board of Directors convene an executive session for the purpose of discussing legal matters pursuant to section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia.
Moved by Jesse. Is there a second? Steve, all in favor? All right.
Aye.
Thank you all.
So if the members will give us about 1 or 2 minutes just to clear the Zoom room and this room, the session should be brief.